Jake here for Extreme Terrain, and today I'm taking a look at the K&N Series 57 FIPK cold air intake fitting 2018 and newer 2-liter JL Wranglers. If you're looking for an easy way to improve the drivability and response of your JL for a good price, then you've got to take a look at this intake from K&N. This is specifically designed to increase airflow and reduce intake temperatures versus your stock setup, which will make for a noticeable difference in the way your Jeep drives and responds. Now, it's a closed box system that also doesn't require a tune either, so that makes it an easy setup. K&N has long been the name in cold air intakes, and with good reason. Their intakes and their filters are high quality, long-lasting pieces that provide noticeable improvements in overall drivability. And this Series 57 system is no exception. But I want to start with that filter. Now, this is a washable, reusable, high-flow air filter that uses a cotton gauze media and an oil design to capture dirt and particulates. Now, since this is notably larger than your stock air filter, it's inherently going to have a lot more air going through it. And these deep pleats in here are going to help with both flow and with the trapping of unwanted debris. And since this is an oil design, you get the added benefit of having that additional layer of protection against dirt and particulates. The oil on the surface is nice and sticky. You can probably see some of the shininess on here. So that can help filter out even some of the smallest particulates that might otherwise slip by on a dry filter. And the best part is that you can just wash this, re-oil it, pop it right back in. You don't need to replace it, so you can just clean it and be on your way. Oil filters like this have a very long lifespan for this reason, especially if you properly care for them. So it can help cut down on the replacement costs, which is nice if you're going to be keeping your Wrangler around for a while. Now, K&N says that you can go up to 100,000 miles without cleaning this filter in ideal conditions, but that's assuming that you're never going to see any kind of dirt or debris. And let's face it, if you're driving in a JL, you're going to be seeing some dirt at some point. So I'd recommend cleaning this out every year or so, but your mileage may vary, so just keep an eye on it and see where you land. The other big feature here is the closed air box. Now, we see plenty of heat shields for cold air intakes, but going with a fully enclosed setup like this one is going to help you make the most of it, especially on a turbocharged engine like the 2-liter in the JL. This is going to pull cooler air from outside of the engine bay through the scoop here, and it's going to keep it from pulling hot air from within the engine bay. Again, that is especially important with turbos since they create such a large amount of heat under the hood. So this big old scoop right here is going to pull that air from outside, funneling it in and through the filter and then out into that intake tube. And since you're pulling it from outside, it's going to help keep those intake temperatures low. Lower intake temperatures means better combustion. Better combustion means more power. And turbos love cooler air. Now, attaching all of that trickery to the intake manifold is our big intake tube over here. This is super lightweight and smooth for maximum airflow. Now, the tube combined with the larger air box here is going to give you some nice resonance too. So you get to hear some of that intake and turbo whoosh noise when you really get on it. Intakes are great for this type of sound because while you're cruising around at lower speeds, you really don't hear all that much. But once you crack the throttle open, you get a lot of more intake noise. And again, in this case, you're going to get some turbo noise as well. And I'm a big fan of that. Another positive here is that this is a no tune required intake. So you don't need to invest in a custom or flash tuning module to get this one to work on your JL. Just install the intake and you're off and ready to go. However, I do say that with the caveat that, as with any other intake, don't expect huge power gains here. You should still feel some difference in the way your vehicle responds since you are funneling more cooler air through the intake and into the engine, but big power gains are not going to be the result here. You will get an appreciable difference. And of course, even though that tune is not required, if you really want to make the most of this setup, you can always invest in a tune. Construction-wise, the filter, as we were talking about earlier, is a 4-layer cotton gauze media and again is an oil design. So this is going to do an excellent job of filtering out dirt and debris. The intake tube and the air box themselves are both made from roto-molded polyethylene. So it's going to provide you with excellent airflow and heat resistance, as well as that nice resonance that we were discussing. When it comes to pricing, this is going to run you about $400, and that makes it a bit of a bargain, especially as compared to other closed box systems. That price puts it pretty much right smack dab in the middle of the spectrum, and doesn't mean that you're sacrificing on quality or functionality at all. Quite the opposite, in fact. So if you're looking for that high quality air intake that's going to be an easy bolt-on upgrade and still make a difference in the driving dynamics of your JL, then this one is absolutely worth checking out. Installation will come in at a 1 out of 3 on our difficulty meter, and it is a bolt-in operation, though it's going to require you to get down there a little bit since you got to attach this inlet pipe to the turbo. However, you should plan on it taking you about an hour to complete, and you don't need anything more than common hand tools to get the job done. Everything you need is included right there in the kit, including the coupler, the clamps, and all the other accoutrements for it. Not much more we can say about it here, so why don't we head on out to the install bay now, and we'll walk you through that process.
For this install, you need a 3/8 ratchet, 3/8 extension, a 10 and 8 millimeter socket, a 1/4 inch ratchet, a T30 and a T20 Torx bit, a 4 millimeter and 3 millimeter Allen wrench, a clip removal tool, and a 12 millimeter wrench. All right, today we're going to install an intake on our Jeep Wrangler, so let's get started. All right, now to get started, to remove our intake, we just need to do a couple things. We need to loosen a couple of our clamps, unplug our intake air temp, and remove a few bolts. So let's start with loosening our hose clamps. All right, we can start here. We can grab our ratchet with our 8 millimeter socket and loosen that clamp on the back. Next, we'll grab our clip removal tool. We'll move the wire from the intake tube here. Now unplug our intake air temp. Just push down and pull out. All right, now we can remove our two 10 millimeter bolts from our intake tube. And now loosen our last clamp over here with our 8 millimeter socket again. All right, now we can remove our whole intake tube. All right, here we can remove our two lines on the back of the air box. Just take your thumb, push in on the tab, pull it off. Same thing on this one. Push down the tab, lift it off. All right, take out our last 10 millimeter bolt on the air box. And we can remove the whole air box now. Just make sure your lines don't get caught. All right, now we need to remove our front grille. There are 6 push clips that go across the top. We're gonna remove them, and then you'll be able to just pull out in the bottom of the bumper, and the front grille will come right off. Now that we have the grill off, we need to remove our front support bar so that we can remove our 2 bolts for our fresh air duct. So we're going to grab our T30 socket. Now we have access to these 2 bolts. We're going to grab our T20 Torx socket and remove those 2 bolts. Now we're going to remove our fresh air duct. There's a grommet under here, so just lift up and then pull the tube out. All right, now that the stock intake is off, we just need to take a couple things off. First thing will be the intake air temp sensor. So we're just going to give that a turn, and it'll line up with the grooves and just pop right out. Put that aside. All right, the other things we need to remove are the 2 rubber grommets on the bottom of the intake box. Just going to slide them off. Put them aside. All right, now we can start assembling our intake together. First thing we need to do is we need to install our studs on the bottom of the box to hold our grommets. So we're gonna take our 10 millimeter bolt, our lock washer, flat washer. We're gonna go to these 2 holes and stick our bolt through, thread our stud on. The same thing on the bottom. All right, we're gonna take our ratchet with our extension and 10 millimeter socket and a 12 millimeter wrench to hold the stud and tighten that down. Now we can put the grommets on that we took off of our stock airbox. All right, now we can install our filter onto our intake tube. We're gonna take our big hose clamp, slide over the filter, and then slide our filter over the end and tighten down our hose clamp. All right, now we can install our intake tube onto our air box. We are going to take our 3 4mm Allen bolts. We'll put our lock washer and washer, thread them in. And take our 4mm Allen wrench, tighten them down. All right, now we can install our vent tube onto the back of the intake pipe. We're gonna take a vent tube, put our O-ring, slide that in there, grab our locking plate, slide that over, take our 3mm Allen bolt, put our lock washer, and then flat washer, thread that in, tighten that down. Now we can take our supplied grommet for our intake air temp sensor and install it into the tube. All right, now we can reinstall our support bar onto the front. Just on the outside, there's a hook at the bottom that will lock into the frame down here. Take that, hand thread our bolts in. And now we can tighten them down with our T30 socket. All right, we can now reinstall our front grille. This row of tabs down here will lock into the frame all along here. Just push them at the bottom and it'll go over on the top. All right, we're gonna reinstall our 6 push pins that we took out of the top of the grill. All right, we're gonna install our coupler onto our turbo muffler. The skinnier part goes against, so put your clamp over. Slide that over. And we can tighten this clamp down with our 8mm socket. Now we can install our intake. First thing we want to do is make sure we put our clamp over. Just let that rest there. And now we're just going to drop our intake in. Now let's set our intake in place. Slide it over the coupler. And go to the airbox side and we're going to push down onto our grommets. All right, we're going to tighten our clamp down. So slide over towards the end. We're going to take our ratchet with our 8mm socket and tighten that down. We can install our intake air temp sensor. Just push into the grommet, it'll lock into place. Now we can plug it back in. All right, we can reconnect our vent lines on the back of the intake. Just slide them over and clip them into place. Take your 10mm bolt and install it in the mounting bracket.
That's going to wrap it up for our review and install of the K&N Series 57 FIPK cold air intake fitting 2018 and newer 2-liter JL Wranglers. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, for all things Jeep, be sure to keep it right here at extremeterrain.com.